Hey there internets, I'm Michael and today on Toucan Game I'm reviewing Patchwork by Mayfair Games. But what is Patchwork? Well, let's take a look at the box here. We have a patchwork quilt, which had already told us it was about on the name of the game. But yeah, I mean, that is the theme of this game. You are building a patchwork quilt. I mean, I can't think of one of the least appealing themes in a game for me, but there you go, that is it. The whole nature of the game is that you are trying to have the most buttons, which are these little cardboard buttons here. Now, if you have the most buttons, you'll win the game. You'll gain buttons by going around this time track, and when you pass one of the buttons, you gain incoming buttons as per the buttons you have on your quilt. So you start off with a completely empty grid that is your quilt, and over the course of the game you buy more tiles to add into your grid, and you can't move the ones you've already got there, so there's kind of an almost Tetris-y spatial awareness aspect of this as you're building up your grid. And these tiles have different costs depending on the tile. They cover a different amount of space, because that's important, because in this, if you have empty spaces at the end of the game, they're going to be minus points for you. You lose buttons. But the income you get is given by the buttons that are shown on each of the tiles. So when you're buying a tile, you're kind of going, okay, well, it's going to cost me this much time, which will move me this far along the track. It's this shape, so it'll fit here within my quilt, and it costs me this many buttons, which is important because A, buttons are your resource you're using throughout the game in order to get quilts and kind of go, oh, well, I want to be able to buy that piece of quilt, etc. But also because those are your points. Every time you're paying for a button, you're losing points in essence. So there is a lot going on in this game. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail than that really on how you actually play this, because I have done a how to play video, so you can watch that for more information on that. What I am going to talk about now though is of course my thoughts and feelings on this game. So let's start with the artwork. Now, you look at the cover, it's a patchwork quilt. That is the artwork. You look at the artwork on the boards, it's patchwork quilt artwork. It's all hideous. It's the sort of thing that your grandparents would make a patchwork quilt out of. It's like old wallpaper looking stuff. But somehow it works. It is this horrible artwork. I really just, like, you look at individual pieces and you're like, that's so ugly. But the overall effect of it, the way it does create that patchwork quilt feel, is superb. It's really well done. You can kind of overlook and almost find it endearing how ugly these pieces are. So yeah, that is the artwork. There's not a lot to talk about really on the artwork. It's quite an abstract game, or at least it could be, but with the buttons and the artwork brings it back into being thematic about making a quilt, but in a good way. Despite, you think of that and you're like, oh God, but actually it's really nice and satisfying to do. So what about components then? Well, I've already held up these boards here, so let's talk about these first. These are good heavyweight boards, so you've got one for each of the players, and then the central board. They're good quality. The button tokens here that I've already held up once, well, they're okay. I mean, they're nothing special, nothing to really complain about either. There's nothing wrong with them. But I want actual buttons. I'm planning on pimping this out to have actual buttons. And I've seen so many people who have copies of this and they've done that. They've just changed these. They've gone out, bought some blue buttons to replace these, and I'm planning on doing the same. And it's not actually that there's anything wrong with these, it's just nicer to have buttons, and it doesn't feel like that big a difficult thing for them to have done straight off the box really. Then of course you've got all the tiles for the different patches, and these are really good, high quality. They're the same quality as your main boards there. They're good, heavy duty, good wearing. They're not going to tear, they're not going to warp, etc. So all very nice. Then you've got the few wooden components here. So we've got our little player markers, and then our neutral token here, which marks where you're allowed to buy from. And again, these are really nice wooden pieces. They're well crafted, well designed, well painted, and yeah, superb. So no complaints really so far. Well, what about the gameplay? Surely there must be something wrong with this game. Well, The only thing I'd really say is wrong with this game is that it only plays 2 players, and it states that in big writing on the box, and that answers the who can 2 play that game as well. Yes, of course they can. It says so on the box. And then I love everything else about this game. The gameplay itself is so elegant. You know, there are so many different aspects in this game, and yet it is so simple. Your turn comes down to a very simple choice. You have 3 potential tiles you could buy that you could add into your quilt. So there you go, that's 3 options there. Or pass. That's it. You're only going to ever have 4 options in a turn. Okay, when you're first starting out and you're presented with the blank board, it can be a bit with, I don't know what piece to get or where to put it especially. So you kind of just throw it down, and you have to do that because you can't really plan for what you're going to be able to buy later on in the game because you don't know where the pieces are going to fall, you don't know what you're going to be able to buy. But that's good. The fact that when you're placing out these tiles, you're doing so randomly at the beginning of the game gives a really good random element to the setup that means every game of this can be different because you're not always going to be able to buy the same pieces and definitely not be able to buy them in the same order. And then there's even this little bonus tile for getting a complete 7x7 grid, which is harder than it sounds for me anyway. I'm not very good at this game though. Other people manage it quite a lot, and I've even seen people manage to fill their entire quilt with no empty spaces, but I've never managed that. I usually get minus score in this. In fact, I'm so bad, but I'm getting better. And that's the thing with this game, you do get better the more you play. So if you're playing someone who's never played before, you're probably going to destroy them a bit. And you'd think having your own player board, building your own quilt, that this would be a very solitary game, that it doesn't really matter that there's another player there or how you're interacting. But it really does, because you can go, oh, well, I think they might buy this. I know how many buttons they've got. If I buy this one, they can't go there. You've got the time track, meaning, right, if I jump too far ahead, they're just going to have turn off, turn off, turn, buying what they want, and giving you no control. There is so much going on in this game, and it is so well designed and so tightly designed to give this extremely fantastic 2-player experience. This is probably the best 2-player only game I have ever played. But really, with a designer so well known and so well reputed as Hugh Rosenberg, would you really expect anything less? And the answer is no. I mean, the design elements of this that are so fantastic, even small little things like adding the little leather patches that you can pick up, make a huge difference to the gameplay, because you're going to have those little gaps, and picking these up means that you want to kind of not rush ahead too much because you don't want to get too ahead of your opponent. They have a lot of turns. But at the same time, you want to get ahead of your opponent. You want to get these because these are really useful for just filling those little gaps. And because you can't really plan and perfect your quilt lovely every single time, these are going to be needed, and they make a big difference. You're getting them for free for starters, but they're going to save you, at the least, no matter where you put it, they're going to save you 2 buttons at the end of the game for nothing, just for being the first one to go past. And there's lots of little things. The whole mechanic of the time board and how that works, the balance of these tiles and the cost of time, the cost of buttons, to the size, to the income, it is superbly well done. What I will say is, if you want a raucous, laughing game with dice chucking, exuberance going on, that's not going to be this. This is a bit of a thinky game, and it is a game with very little luck. Once, other than that initial setup, there is no luck in this. There is no dice rolls, there's no random cards, there is literally no randomness at all. Everything comes down to the choice of a player, which obviously is not going to appeal to a lot of people, and often that would put me off of a game. But I don't know, somehow this game just makes it work. And it's a really short game, which means that you're just kind of playing in 20 minutes and you're like, should we play again? And you do. And then you're like, okay, well, that's enough for today. You're not going to play game after game after game. You're going to play a few games maybe. But that's fine, because then a week later, you pull it out again, and you're just going to play it time and time again. And it's not really going to feel old, because there is so much randomization. There are so many of these tiles for the quilt pieces. The number of variations of how they're going to come up when you're putting them out in the circle is huge. So it has a fantastic level of replay there. So my summary is, people are going to like this who want a kind of couples two-player game, a little thinky, not very mean at all, but still with a level of interaction there, and that has like next to no luck at all, but is a quick game, almost to the point of being a filler, but it really doesn't feel that way. Okay, I do hope that you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. And of course, if you have, please do check out the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as subscribing to the channel and sharing it with your friends and family. And also take a look at us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.